Okay, let's run.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from many and all corners of the nerd universe. We find out more about them by taking your questions. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest on this episode is the one and only of Dismay Comics. Brandon Ingram is here with us. Brandon, how are you, good sir?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you for being with us. Now, if you have any questions for Brandon Ingram as we go throughout the course of this episode, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Our producers are going to be keeping an eye on it as we go throughout the course of this broadcast. But in the meantime, Brandon, when did you start reading comics?
I'd say pretty much when I was around 7 or 8. The very first time I picked up some comics was I went to a yard sale with my mom. Loved doing that as a kid and stuff, and bought a whole shoebox of 70s and 80s Marvel and DC comics, just random issues, random back issues. But reading those is what kind of really got me into comics, just these random issues of Adventures of Superman, Amazing Spider-Man, DP7, like just some obscure Marvel books and stuff like that here and there, but it was really good. And then from there, I read comics here and there. There was breaks here and there. I got serious about it sometime in high school, pretty much when the New 52 hit. A friend of mine gave me the first trade of Batman New 52, and it was that Court of Owls. Gave me Court of Owls. I read that. I loved it, and I pretty much have steadily been keeping up with comics since. And then when Rebirth hit, we were talking about this backstage with Rebirth. When Rebirth hit, that's when I was like picking up floppies like every week, basically. So
I like that. That's good. That's good stuff. And yes, I've read the Court of Owls as well by, I believe it was Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo.
Yeah.
Great tag team there. A lot of people talk about them in the comic circuit as being one of the best creative teams in the history of comics. So, hey, fair argument to be made, I would say, with the Court of Owls storyline, among many other things too. They've done more than just the Batman series. They've done some other characters, some other series as well. So, got to give credit where credit is due. And I mentioned Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo. Are there any other favorite comic book writers or artists, past or present, that stand out to you?
So when it comes to favorite writers, currently I think Jeff Lemire might be my favorite comic writer. Tom King's up there. Scott Snyder's up there. I know there's some other names. They're just not popping up in my head. In terms of artists, like some of my favorite artists, my favorite's Jason Fabok. I'm not sure how to say it sometimes. He did The Button. He did the art for the Batman Flash Button. He did Dark Side War. That was the New 52 like big event that happened. He also did 3 Jokers. He's done some. No, that's Gary Frank. Never mind. Jason Fabok. I was about to say Doomsday Clock, but that's Gary Frank. But Jason Fabok, I really like Dustin Nguyen, guy who did art for Descender. He did Little Monsters recently for Image. He's done a lot of like cutesy little Gotham type art. He's like really great at watercolor. I love his stuff. Bill Sienkiewicz, when it comes to like older artists, like from like the 80s and stuff, I love Bill Sienkiewicz stuff because his stuff, especially for that time in like the 80s and early 90s, was just so different. Like it was so different from the typical art style at the time. Whenever he first started with like Moon Knight, he stuck with that regular art style. But once he got done with Moon Knight, he was able to branch off with like New Mutants and stuff. Like he did the those like beautiful painted covers of New Mutants and stuff, as well as an Elektra series and all kinds of stuff. Bill Sienkiewicz is up there. I know there's more, but those are kind of the top ones that pop in my head.
That list is impressive. Most impressive. What would you say are some of your favorite comic book based movies or TV series, past or present?
My favorite comic book based movie would probably, and it's in my top 3 movies of all time, is The Dark Knight. Like, I really love The Dark Knight. I've seen it dozens of times. I really like it. Almost seems like every single time there's something new that I pick up. I haven't seen it in a couple years because, not that I got burnt out on it, but it was like, I'll wait a while before I watch it again. The Dark Knight's definitely up there. Another one I really like, this is more recent. The Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse animated movies that have come out recently. Like, I really, really like those. So yeah, I would say The Dark Knight is probably my favorite when it comes to comic book based movies, pretty much.
Well, hello, beautiful. Anyway, you look nervous. You want to know how I got these scars? Anywho, fun fact, The Dark Knight just turned 15 in the month of July, and we did a 15th anniversary celebration watch-along for The Dark Knight, which you can find right here on this YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out in the for the DC Nerds playlist. You can find it there. Go back and watch that after you're done watching this incredible episode of what is known as, and I quote, with our guest, Brandon Ingram of Dismay Comics. And don't forget to like and share this episode with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Brandon, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to have those there and take those from you. There you go. Nice little segue. I like that. So, hey, Dark Knight's a heck of a film, man. There's no question. I mean, I would have given him the award for Best Supporting Actor if he was still alive, honestly, because that performance is just that good. Honestly, I felt like I was watching the devil come to life. Honestly, that's how creepy and whacked out I was. I'm wigged out I was. I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, this is literally the incarnation of the devil, man. It's creepy. It's crazy stuff.
And it's good writing, at least to me, seeing the movie, because like it progresses and you see progression from the beginning to the end, like just stuff like steadily going downhill or steadily going uphill. Like nothing feels like out of the left corner or anything like that. It makes sense, the trajectory that it goes even from the beginning.
Yep, that's a fair point. When did you decide to become an indie comic book writer?
So it was around pretty much 2019, early 2019. Shortly after I got out of high school back in 2015, I was writing a bunch of screenplays and stuff because I really liked doing that as a hobby at that time. I was writing a bunch of screenplays, learned all that stuff as soon as I got out of high school. Writing a bunch of screenplays, entering competitions and stuff. Some of my shorts won like little awards here and there. Some, it was more like, good try, better next time. But they would leave really good constructive criticism to where I could apply that to future scripts and stuff. And as I was going with that, I was kind of like, all right, some of these scripts, like, I'm never going to be able to make. Like I had what's now a comic, The Gallows Man. At the time, it was a screenplay, a feature-length screenplay. And it was like, for a movie, it's low budget. I could see this being made for $500,000, $1 million. But still, it's like, for Hollywood, that's low budget. For Brandon, it's like, I'm never going to see that amount of money ever. So it's like, I do want to make this. And I was reading comics at the time. I love comics. I've been reading comics forever. And I was like, I wonder if I can just learn how to write a comic and adapt the screenplay into the comic format, because that feature-length screenplay was a superhero story, basically. Very, very like campy and goofy with a crazy amount of violence. But it was like, I think it could work. So I worked on that, and it kind of just went from there, as well as like me wanting to turn some of my horror stories and horror ideas into comics, because around that time I had read Scott Snyder's Witches, and that was one of those things where it was like, ooh, like I knew comics could be scary before, because you had magazines like Eerie or Creepy, you had stuff like that, you had Tales from the Crypt, like those comics and stuff. It was like, when I read Witches, I was like, holy crap, you can like really make comics scary. You can really have an emotion, have a vibe with it. And I was like, okay, I want to make these scripts into comics now because of that influence there, those horror scripts.
Anyway, hey, before you know it, we're going to be right around the corner for Halloween, so get ready.
It's
watch your
coming
favorite.
up.
Yeah, boy, that creeps me out. Feel free to watch your favorite scary movie. Hello, Sydney. Anyway, haven't they made like 60 of those Scream movies by now? Jeez.
Yeah.
Man, they should have stopped at 4, honestly. Because 4 was so,
4
honestly,
was good. It was really good.
See, people, and this is the thing. Like, the first Scream was revolutionary for its time, right? So you got to give 96's original Scream. By the way, rest in peace, Wes Craven. Some credit, right? But then 2 and 3 for me, it just didn't do it. It just didn't feel like the same vibe, even though people like the sequels. I mean, hey, listen, if you do, that's fine. But for me, 2 and 3, And then Scream 4 came out, and it's got a new, young, up-and-coming, like, hip cast, but they also pay tribute to the originals with, Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, those three that were the original. And I'm thinking, okay, so you mix in the new blood with some of the old blood, right? How is that going to work? And it worked out very, and I mean very well, because that third act of Scream 4, man, when we find out who is the killer
And I was about to say that's an issue with over half of the Scream movies, is like the reveal of who the killer is usually a letdown. 4 was not a letdown. The first one, the first Scream movie, great reveal. Great reveal of who the killers are. Scream 2, that was a letdown. Scream 3 was a huge letdown. Like, it was an out of left field choice of who the killer is.
Yeah.
But then Scream 4 is like, oh, like I like that. As well as like, I also like that villain, like that person who was Ghostface. Because I was like, oh, they're like so like mean and evil, but they're not like, it's not like some of the recent reveals in the recent movies where it's like, okay, like,
yeah. Well, without giving anything away, because I have yet to see, because I can't, comment or speculate on Scream 5, and they actually just came out with Scream 6. Have you seen 5 and 6?
5 I actually like. 5 I don't know. 1 is still my favorite. Well, 5 might be tied with 4 for me. 6 was so. I like parts of 6. There were a lot of parts I liked with 6, in that it was like the city environment. I liked the difference with there.
It was a different location, wasn't it? Wasn't it New York City for Scream Part 6?
Yeah.
New York City, okay. Yeah, that was a huge change, because we're so used to hearing the word Wilkesboro every single time. And I'm thinking, are there no other places in this universe other than Wilkesboro? Like, you're in a small town USA. Where's everybody else?
Yeah. Yeah, before it was just small town for most of the movies, and then Scream 3, they did Hollywood, and that didn't really go that good. But
that's a valid point. All right. Well, I am curious. There's a little part of me that's curious if 5 and 6 are any good. But then again, I'm thinking to myself, horror films, they come out with so many sequels and reboots, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? Because I thought they ended it pretty darn good with Scream 4. Like, if that was the last one, I'm like, yeah, that was.
Oh yeah.
That's a nice little period to the end of the franchise. But no, producers were thinking, well, Wes Craven may be dead, but we can still milk the cash cow, right? We can, yeah. Well, whatever. I can't comment on 5 and 6. I know I'm giving it a bad rap without actually seeing it. I know that's not fair as an audience member to moviegoers, but I don't know. Sometimes there's just too many other franchises that have sequels. I'm just thinking, why? why.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So you mentioned some good names there, good reasons for why you decided, I should say, to become an indie comic book writer. But on this two-sided coin here that is not really in my hands, what would you say are some of the rewards about being an indie comic book writer?
Really, like, because writing comics is like such a niche thing. Like collecting, reading comics are already niche, because you can look at like sales now where the top selling book of the month sold 200, well, let's factor in digital as well, 300,000 copies. That's the top selling book of the month, compared to like the 90s where like every month you had a book selling like over 1 million copies, basically more than one book. It was multiple, because you had a lot of the stuff with Image in the early 90s. Now, whenever the whole comic bubble burst happened, like that kind of killed it. But yeah, like comics, it was nice seeing where it was, but I already know, at least for the next 20 or 30 years, it's not going to be that. It'll never reach that the next 20, 30 years. That sucks. I want comics to be as big as they once were, but realistically, I just know it's not going to do that. Comics, at least, because the biggest thing right now is manga. I love me some manga. So comics just need to find a way to market like they can with manga. But to answer your question, I like it because it's a niche thing. Comics is, to where those that are in it are pretty passionate about it. They like it a good bit. I like comics a good bit, to where there's such passion in it, to where when I'm writing it, I love what I write. Like I mean, like any creative should like what they write if they have 100% control over it. I don't see how you wouldn't like what you write and then put it out if you have 100% control over it. I understand if you're working for a company, you're sometimes forced to do certain things that you might not want to with your writing. But if you have 100% control over what you write, you should enjoy what you write. So I enjoy what I write, and seeing others enjoy what I write, whether it's through horror or through comedy or through action or whatever else I want to make in the future. It's really nice to see, because it's a part of that niche collective, that passionate group, because it's something so niche. And they're sticking around with comics, even though it's so niche. It's really awesome to see. I want comics to be big, but I am okay with what it is now.
Wow. Okay. I respect that. Yeah, wanting comics to be so big that you have to get a much bigger marquee, or in the words of 1975, you're going to need a bigger boat. Yeah, you're going to need a bigger boat on that one. But listen, indie is indie. Indie comics are great. They're fantastic. And once again, we are here with Brandon Ingram of Dismay Comics on And I Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Brandon, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to take those as they come in, respectively. Whether you were joining us live or on the replay, thank you so much for being here. We do greatly appreciate it. Opposite side of the fence, though, what are some of the biggest challenges about being an indie comic book writer?
The biggest challenges, probably the biggest challenge, but I'll touch on a little bit of this in a second. But the biggest challenge is probably this isn't how I make my money. Like, this isn't how I have my income, basically. It simply is a passion thing. That's the plus side with it, is like, I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't passionate about it. Like, when it comes to indie comics, if someone is trying to get into making comics in terms of like making money, and that's the reason you're doing it, that's the sole reason you're doing it, get out now. Find some other creative outlet, whether it's screenwriting or whatever it may be. Comics is not, you're not in it for the money. You're in it because you love the media, you love the art form. And it's amazing to see. But I will say, yeah, one of the struggles is it's not my main source of income. So I try to do it like pretty much anytime I have free time is me working on comics or me reading other independents comics, basically. Like that's a lot of my free time. That's probably 80 to 90% of my free time is dealt with indie comics. I just love it. You have to have that love and that passion for it, because there's I'd say it's probably less than this. 0.1% of indie comic makers are actually like funding their main income through making indie comics. So that just shows vast majority of us, pretty much almost all of us, this isn't how we're making our main source of income, but we just love it so much. We love this media so much that we're doing it. But I will also say because of that, that falls into not being able to put a book out every month because you just don't have the time or the money to do it, because a lot of times we're paying out of pocket for the artist or whatever you need help with in your comic making. So that's the struggle, but it is very rewarding to be able to have full control of this thing, but also be able to see like when you're working with an artist or a letterer, you give them notes, you give them scripts and stuff, and they do the art. And most of the time you'll see the page that comes back. It's like that looks great. That looks like better than what I had in my head, because I'm not a professional artist like you. You know how it should be laid out, so that's perfect. So it's amazing to see. I don't know, like there's those struggles of like, I'm not making money on this, but the being able to be fully creative in this industry makes it so much worth it.
My goodness, man. Well, you know what they say, if you love what you do, it's not called work.
Exactly.
So I will definitely give you that one. I am curious though, what was the Dismay Comics? What is the E True Hollywood story behind that? In other words, how did Dismay Comics come together?
So it was around either March or April of 2019. I had met Jim Kruger back in February of 2019. Jim Kruger, he wrote Justice, he wrote Earth X, and a few other Marvel and DC comics. But I met him at this event that was not a comic event, and through a 10-15 minute interaction, it just kind of pushed me and inspired me to actually like do this, to want to make comics. So either March or April of 2019, I started looking for artists and stuff to work on these scripts that I had already written. I was going through DeviantArt, all that stuff, hiring these artists. And while I was doing that, I was like, if I'm going to publish these, because at the time I didn't know if I'd try to find an indie publisher to put them through or publish them myself. It took me a couple weeks to just be like, no, I want to try publishing these. I kind of want to learn everything with making comics rather than just one or two avenues. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need a publishing name. I need a brand name. But before that happened, I was writing a series, a horror anthology series, and it took me 4 or 5 hours, probably more in a day, to think of the title of that series. And the series was called Dismay Avenue. Dismay Avenue. It came from, ultimately, back in middle school, I read Goosebumps by R.L. Stine, but he also had like a slightly upper level version called Fear Street even though it was not like creepy creatures and stuff, it was usually teenagers and like, oh, who's the killer amongst us? And then you pretty much know by the end. But I always like that title, Fear Street. So it's kind of trying to think of like horror anthology name with like the fear equivalent and the street equivalent. And so 4 or 5 hours came up with Dismay Avenue. And then I was like, okay, I've got my horror book title. I'm now going to be publishing this horror book. I need a publishing name. And within 10 minutes, Dismay Comics. So Dismay Avenue came first, then Dismay Comics, almost like a Detective Comics and DC Comics type thing.
I see what you did there. Yeah, I see what you did there. Dismay Comics, DC. Anybody getting the hints here in the backstage area, or maybe the person who may be watching or listening to this? Are you hearing this? Are you getting it? Okay, starting to click in my mind. But no, that's great. Congratulations on that. That is really good stuff, and we thank you for sharing that with us. Man, you had this idea. You find these great creative people, and all of a sudden, one thing turns into an avenue, and then it becomes a comic. So hey, whatever gets you up in the morning, darling, that's what works.
Exactly.
So with that being said, Tales from Town City, that's interesting. And I see a lot of creatures and dogs and butterflies and dogs and cats and snakes living together in mass hysteria. So I'm just curious, Tales from Town City, how did this all come about?
So Tales from Town City, I'll first say, spun off from a mistake I made in The Gallows Man. This series, which will be more than one title, started from a mistake I made. It was more a publishing and editing mistake. So I have a series called The Gallows Man. It's basically take 1960s Adam West Batman, like the fun campiness of that, but combine it with Inglorious Bastards, basically. Because it's the fun Adam West campy cheesiness mixed in with like over-the-top violence, basically. Like it's rated M, but it's only because of the violence. There's no language, no alcohol use, no smoking, no nudity. It's strictly because of the violence and people being so desensitized to it, where they're just like, let's have a great day while like someone's hanging in the background, basically. So making Gallows Man, I get to Gallows Man issue 2, and when it comes to the story, I think it was 47 pages long, and I made a mistake in the amount of pages that I thought I needed, because through the printer that I use, the company printer that I use, they print by 4-page increments. So like 44 pages, 48 pages, 52 pages, that sort of thing. They go by 4-page increments. I made a mistake. I got to 47 and I was like, crap, I only have 1 page left. And there's some advertisement stuff that I want to put in the back for a podcast ad, no one else's advertisements. But I want to put that, as well as I like to put like a letters page, like a couple letters pages in my comics, basically behind the scenes stuff of making the comics. I was like, well, crap, I'm gonna have to go up to 52. So I have 5 pages to fill. 3 of them were filled with letters pages and the ad. So I had 2 pages left. I was like, okay, with these 2 pages, I'll just come up with a story based on one of the minor characters in The Gallows Man. So it was a 2-page story about Newsboy, who's like basically Gallows Man's Robin equivalent, pretty much. It was a funny little 2-story thing, but I came up with that just because I made the error of messing up the page increment. And when I did that, I was like, ooh, I would like to do this with more of the minor characters in The Gallows Man, to where it then got my gears turning in my head of like, I should just make an anthology series with all of these stories of the minor characters in The Gallows Man. And so that's how Tales from Town City spun off. All these minor characters introduced in The Gallows Man, I wanted to make like 4-page, 8-page, 12-page, 16-page stories on, basically. And so that's kind of how that spun. All from a mistake I made in counting the pages for Gallows Man 2.
My goodness, sometimes the most incredible ideas come when you least expect them. They sometimes just come out of nowhere, and they sometimes come from making mistakes, which in this
Yeah.
case is what happened with your series and with regards to some of your supporting characters and respective stories. And once again, we are here with Brandon Ingram of Dismay Comics on this episode of And I Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Brandon, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Whether you are joining us live or on the replay, thank you for being here. We really greatly appreciate it, I should say. Have there been any special memories for you, Brandon, from going to conventions, whether you were there as a vendor or there as an attendee?
Yes. Literally this past January was the first ever convention I had a table at. I was in Artist Alley. I won't be doing this convention again because it was ultimately for the first convention me doing, it was too big. It was Fan Expo New Orleans. It was good though. It was a good time. Yeah, first convention, Fan Expo New Orleans. Yeah, it was a big one. They had the Eddie from Stranger Things. He took up the line for him was insane because it was his first or second convention he had done in the United States. So it was huge. And Sam Raimi was there. His line was super huge and stuff. But yeah, so I was there. Sales, we did fairly good. We've had smaller conventions, a few since then. We've actually done better at smaller conventions. But I was there, and it's my favorite convention memory. I met Jim Kruger, the guy I had talked about earlier. He was at Fan Expo, and I mentioned it earlier, he was an inspiration for me, pushing myself into making comics. And now I'm in this convention with a table in Artist Alley, and I can see him across the way. It was just weird to see how 4 years after meeting him, how I was there, and had a really good interaction with him. I went up to him, we talked for at least 15 minutes. I even made a 3-part TikTok on detailing it all, but it was such a great interaction. I told him about when we had met before and how he inspired me to write comics, and now here I am at Fan Expo and Artist Alley selling my comics. We got to talking a lot and stuff, and he was like, "Hey, do you have any of your comics? I'd love to check them out." I was like, "Yes, I do." And I quickly rushed over to my table. I was like, "Oh, got to find the best copies of Gallows Man number 1 and 2." And I got those, went back to the table, and I thought I'd just hand it to him and he'd put it under the table and that'd be it. I'd still be happy with that because holy crap, Jim Kruger has my comics. He opens up one of the comics and he is flipping through it. He's starting to read it in front of me. And he gets to a midway point in the comic. There's a character named Major Swastika, and he's this over the top, bad Nazi villain who's obsessed with swastikas, and he has an Elmer Fudd speech impediment, the "you wascally wabbit," sulfuric acid, stuff like that. He starts reading 3 pages of the comic out loud because he saw, and I told him oh, it's Elmer Fudd's speech impediment. He was laughing. I was oh my gosh, this is great. He's reading 3 pages out loud in Major Swastika's voice that I have in my head. I didn't tell him how it sounded with a German accent or anything like that. He's reading it out loud, and I'm just hearing him say all the lines, and he's cracking up here and there. And I was just taken back. I was holy crap, Jim Kruger's reading my comic and he thinks it's funny. It was just, oh my gosh, it was such a great experience. And then to cap it off, that same day, later that night, when we're all packing up and we're going to the loading bay to put our stuff in our cars and stuff like that. This was maybe 6 or 7 hours after the whole Jim Kruger encounter. I'm putting stuff in my trunk, and then I hear someone from the side. I hear, "Is that Brandon?" I was like, "The heck? Who the heck knows my name?" I turn, it's Jim Kruger. And like he's like bringing his stuff, and he's like starting to load his stuff. We have a quick like interaction of basically have a good day, nice, it was nice to meet you, that sort of thing. And I'm driving away, and my buddy's with me. He helps me with the conventions and stuff. I'm driving away, and it takes me a few minutes, and I look over at my buddy, and I'm like, I never told him my name. I never told Jim Kruger my name, which means he looked at the credits page in the comic, saw written by Brandon Ingram, and remembered that for 6 or 7 hours, to where whenever we get to the loading dock, he's like, is that Brandon? It's a minor, but it stuck with me to where it's like, holy crap. Like that's my favorite convention experience. It probably will be for years until I meet Kevin Smith and like give him a comic that is like, that I'm currently writing that's very much inspired by Clerks. But this right here, the Jim Kruger experience was the biggest thing for me.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that with us, man. But dude, throwing yourself into the deepest end of the pool with Fan Expo New Orleans. Oh my gosh. Like Fan Expo has some of the biggest shows in the country. I've been to Fan Expo Philadelphia, and that's a heck of a show too. And yes, the lines can be excruciatingly long.
Oh, yeah.
For certain people. I can't speak for the Stranger Things. You said it was Stranger Things. I can't speak for that because I've never seen an episode of Stranger Things. Sorry.
It was you've probably at least seen the memes where it's the guy with like the long 80s hair.
Yeah, I've seen
Eddie. He was like the biggest thing of season 4, and like everyone talked about him to where like that line was insane. It was at least twice the size of Sam Raimi's line, and that was a long line.
Yeah, I was going to say Sam Raimi's had a long-standing career, more so than that kid.
Yeah.
But my gosh. Yeah, Sam Raimi gave us the original Spider-Man movies. Thank you, Sam.
Oh, yeah.
First 2, still masterpieces to this day. And Spider-Man 2 turns 20 next year, so
wow.
Don't worry. We'll be here to celebrate it, Brandon. We're going to celebrate it. It's a big one. You got to celebrate Spider-Man, especially the first 2. You got to celebrate those 2 films, brother.
Yeah,
for sure. But man, that's a heck of a story. When you keep mentioning his last name Kruger, forgive me, I'm kind of thinking of the guy in the suit with Freddy. Yeah, because I'm sorry, I think of Freddy Krueger when you mentioned that. I'm sorry, but Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the best horror films ever made. So, no problem with that. Depending on how you look at the sequels, that could be another story. I don't know, because how many Nightmare on Elm Streets have there been? Like almost a dozen. Gosh, too many to count, I would venture to say. Gosh. But thank you for sharing that with us, Brandon. I do greatly appreciate it. I want to let you know that this episode, and every episode, I should say, of And I Quote, is indeed powered by our good friends over there at Poddex. Now, Poddex are the hottest new tool for podcasters looking to have more meaningful conversations or gamify their podcast. You simply shuffle up, ask a question, let the content roll. Get yours today at poddex.com and use that code Ryan10. That's RYAN10. Ryan10 for 10% off your order. You're not going to want to miss out on that, my friends. So Poddex wants to know, Brandon, what is your most unusual talent, other than the fact that you're friends with a person who has the last name of Kruger?
Most unusual talent, probably. Oh, let's see. Oh, I probably have something else. I'm 6'7", so this isn't unusual. I'm fairly decent at basketball. That's not unusual. Unusual talent. Let's see. I can parallel park fairly easily. And I don't live in the big city, so I'm not used to that. I'm not used to always parallel parking. I can do it fairly easily, and I don't have a car that does it like by itself. So I guess that's unusual. There's probably more that's just like repressed, to where whenever I get into a situation, it'll just like engage. like the mutant gene, basically. Maybe that'll happen.
Oh, there you go. Hey, X-Men, some of the more popular characters in the realm of fiction, and also there could be real X-Men out there. You never know. You just got to start looking, I guess. But Poddex wants to know, what's something that people think makes them look cool, but actually makes them look ridiculous?
Fedoras are up there. Some people can rock a fedora. I'd say most can't, though.
Indiana Jones, he can rock a fedora.
He can rock a fedora.
He's been doing it for only 40 years.
But I'd say this isn't everyone, but most people that think they can rock a fedora, I don't think can rock a fedora.
Okay.
That's the one that comes to mind.
That's okay. That's fine. That's completely fine. That's, hey, Poddex poses the questions, and and our guest or guests, depending on how you look at it, have the answers. And every answer is different. That's the beauty of these questions. What's the funniest name you can think of for a pet?
Potential food.
There you go. That's the name,
possible. Right? Yeah. Potential food.
Okay, potential food is the name. Okay, the name you would think of.
Yeah, PF.
Strangest
for sure.
Got it. Okay. I was just making sure. I just wanted to clarify that for just a second. What's something I would never guess about you? Probably the fact that you're 6'7", because I can't tell.
That's probably up there. A lot of people are usually shocked about that. I don't know. That I'd probably say there's other stuff, but the most shocking thing for people that they couldn't guess is probably the height thing, especially through the camera.
Yeah, because all cameras and people's sets are put together a specific way and at different angles. With all due respect, because you got to look good on camera.
Exactly.
To the best of your ability, by the way.
Yeah.
The best. I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but if you have a good camera and audio setup, that's not a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
So, from a technical standpoint, if you know where I'm going with this, there you go. What is something you get wrong almost every single time that you do it?
Almost every single time that I do it.
Could be anything.
Probably. I guess this is somewhat like get wrong when I do it. Trying to remember my best friend's birthday. I never remember the right birthday. I remember the month. I never remember the day, though. And it's coming up, and I got to find out, because it's in September. I need to find out what the date is without him knowing that I'm trying to figure out the date. So I'll have to solve that eventually.
There you go. Make sure all the pieces of the puzzle fit very nicely within the puzzle board, I should say. But I do want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Brandon Ingram for being our guest on this episode of And I Quote. We appreciate you being here, Brandon. Where can the person watching or listening to this follow you on social media and keep up to date with all the incredible things you're doing over there at Dismay Comics?
So yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok on Dismay Comics. It's DISMAY Comics for all of those social media platforms. And pretty much just follow along with me as an indie creator. I have a couple of series out right now and going to have a new series out, Tales from Town City #1, as we talked about earlier. That'll be coming out September 5th on Kickstarter. That's when it launches. So pretty much whenever that comes out, just help support the book. There's pretty much like pledges. You do pledges on Kickstarter. There's a pledge for any budget from $1 to $70. Like any little bit helps. And if you're not able to donate, always sharing out the Kickstarter and the Kickstarter page and telling people about it, that's always very helpful.
Fantastic, kind sir. We appreciate you being here, and we wish you the best of luck with everything you got moving forward over there at Dismay Comics. My name is Ryan of Nerd Culture. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. If you want to check us out on all forms of social media, at It's Nerd Culture, and on YouTube at Nerd Culture Channel. All those links can be found within the description of this episode and all our episodes of And I Quote, as well as our other videos. Also, we're this close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Once we do, we're going to throw a great big live celebration with returning guests, some special guests, and some special giveaways too. So tell your friends about us, because they're going to tell their friends, and they tell their friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. You know how these things go. And also, the new series Ahsoka is finally here. We're going to be talking about it. Spoiler heavy, by the way. Spoiler heavy discussions Thursday night, August 24th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, with special guests Derek, Tyler, Attico, and J.O. Gribble here on Ahsoka's weekly mission. And then on Monday, August the 28th, Power Rangers, one of the most popular properties in the history of geekdom and nerdom, turns 30. That's right, Brandon. It turns 30. On Monday, August the 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to do a great big, and I do mean more phenomenal, celebration of all things Power Rangers, whether it's your favorite seasons, your characters, your favorite moments, whether it's your favorite toys, favorite video games, favorite comic books, Brandon. Comic books. Yeah. Power Rangers are making a huge impact over there at Boom Comics, if you know what I'm saying, brothers and sisters. Ooh, yeah. So tune in for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So many great things are coming your way, and we could not be more excited to have you on this journey with us. Once again, like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell to get notified of when our videos go live. Stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe. Remember that life is better when reading, and indie supports indie. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Sweet dreams they placed on me inside my mind. Chance my throat, twist the past, my memories are fading fast. Am I still missed? You understand? Who do you want me to be? Am I still
Choose high-flying action. Choose death-defying escapes. Choose spine-tingling thrills. Choose nail-biting intrigue. Now's your chance to choose the adventure. The Captain Hawkland Adventures. Available on Amazon.com.
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.